Have you ever poured, tons of energy into trying to connect with people, maybe on a deeper level, like in your neighborhood or at work, maybe even with family?
Oh, yeah.
And you felt like the impact just wasn't quite sticking, like you were doing all the right things, but I don't know, it wasn't translating.
Yeah, that's a really common feeling, I think. We often fall back on methods that feel like um, maximum effort,
Hmm.
right? Being the loudest, trying to be super persuasive, always initiating.
Right, always pushing.
Exactly. And yet the results can feel kind of superficial, or they fade away. There's this sense of striving, but the roots don't seem to go deep.
Totally. And that feeling, that sort of disconnection, putting in all the work, but
Yeah.
feeling like something crucial is missing.
Yeah.
Well, that's exactly why we're doing this deep dive today. We're looking at a specific concept from the source material a listener shared. It's called the person of peace strategy.
hmm And this source material, it's fascinating. It's a collection of insights, articles, notes, all exploring this idea, drawing a lot from, ancient wisdom, but really connecting it to how we live now.
So our mission here is to basically cut through the noise, unpack what this person of peace idea really is, where it originates, and maybe how understanding it could offer a pretty transformative shift in how we engage with the world.
Yeah, maybe like a shortcut to grasping something that honestly feels pretty counterintuitive compared to our usual hustle culture.
Definitely. Okay, so let's dive in. Let's unpack this. What is the core idea of the person of peace strategy?
Well, the first thing to get is that it's not some newfangled, marketing gimmick.
Okay.
The source traces it right back to Jesus' instructions, actually, specifically in Luke chapter 10, when he sent out the 72 disciples.
Ah, okay. So this isn't something you'd just pick up in a modern leadership seminar.
Not at all. The source is really clear on this. It's not just a tactic. It uses phrases like a divine insight into the architecture of kingdom strategy. Even calls it a sacred blueprint.
Wow. Okay. So pretty foundational stuff.
Yeah. The idea is Jesus wasn't sending them out like salespeople trying to hit a quota or deliver some perfectly polished presentation.
Right.
He was sending them out as discerners.
Discerners.
Yeah.
Okay. What does that mean? Not relying on their own charisma or their sales pitch, but on sensing something else.
Exactly. Sensing or discerning what God was already doing. That's a huge shift in focus right there, isn't it?
It really is. So the core idea is about finding where God's already at work.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of feeling like you have to manufacture the results or like bring God into a situation yourself.
You got it. It's a move away from just doing stuff, maybe without real clarity, towards prayerfully discerning what God himself is initiating. We're meant to be more like spiritual detectives looking for clues rather than a marketing team launching a big campaign.
That detective idea, it suggests something really fundamental about how God works, doesn't it? The source mentions God preparing hearts before we even arrive on the scene.
Precisely. There's a theology behind this. The source uses the term prevenient grace. It's a Wesleyan term, basically meaning the grace that goes before.
Goes before. Okay.
It's the belief that God is already active in the world. He's softening hearts, stirring curiosity, maybe planting seeds of desire for peace or truth, even in people or places we might assume are completely closed off.
So wait, it's not that I'm the one bringing God into the conversation?
Right.
It's more like I'm being invited to join him in what he's already doing.
That's exactly it. And this person of peace, they become like a signpost, an indicator of that prior divine activity. Finding them isn't some shortcut to avoid effort.
Right.
It's more like a signal from God showing where your energy will align best with his work. And that requires, spiritual sensitivity, listening through prayer, and a certain amount of faith, frankly.
Yeah.
Trusting the unseen groundwork over just visible activity.
Which really pushes against our culture's obsession with instant results and metrics, doesn't it?
Totally. It's a challenge.
Which brings us right back to Luke 10 and Jesus's specific instructions. They're surprisingly concrete, aren't they?
They really are. If you look at Luke 10, verses 5 through 7, he tells them, whatever house you enter, first say, peace to this house.
Okay, offer peace.
And if a son of peace is there, your peace will rest upon him. But if not, it will return to you.
So there's the peace test, see if it sticks, basically.
Right. But then he says something that feels, really countercultural to how we think about efficiency today. He says, stay in that house, eat what is set before you, and do not move around from house to house.
Yeah, stay in that house. That feels slow. And eat what is set before you. Don't go looking for better options.
And that's where it gets really interesting. Stay, eat what's provided, don't move around. This just flies in the face of our modern tendency to optimize everything, right? To hedge our bets, move on quickly if things aren't popping right away.
Yeah, we'd be networking the whole town in an afternoon.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But eating what is set before you, that implies receiving hospitality, maybe even being a bit dependent, accepting what's offered rather than demanding your own terms, and staying.
Right?
That speaks to slow work, incarnational work maybe, deep relationship, abiding, not just dropping in.
It sounds like the idea is that the kingdom grows through these patient, authentic, kind of spirit-led relationships built on trust. Stuff that happens slowly, often under the radar.
That's the picture, yeah. Depth over breadth, you could say, especially at the start.
Okay, so who is this person of peace? How do we spot them? What are the signs we should be looking for?
The source defines them as someone God has already prepared. They're spiritually open, maybe curious, deftly receptive, and crucially, they often have relational credibility within their own circle, their own community.
So they're welcoming, they listen, they lean in when you talk about deeper stuff.
Yeah, those are key signals.
Mm-hmm.
They might be influential, but not necessarily like a CEO or mayor. Could be a respected elder, a trusted friend, someone people naturally turn to, maybe a gatekeeper to a network you'd never access otherwise.
And this is important, right? They might not even share your faith yet. They're just open.
That's a really critical distinction the source makes. Their openness, their welcome, their willingness to listen, that's the sign of God's prep work. They function as a kind of relational gateway or a conduit of influence.
So the message doesn't just stop with them.
Right. Through them, it can flow naturally along existing relationships. They're described as the key to the harvest, not the harvest itself.
That makes sense. The source brings up some biblical examples, right? Like Rahab.
Rahab and Joshua too, yeah.
Yeah.
A perfect, if maybe surprising example. She was an outsider, but because God was already working in her heart, she mentions hearing about the God of Israel, she was receptive to the spies.
And her openness saved her whole family and gave the spies crucial access.
Exactly. Or think about the Samaritan woman in John 4. Jesus discerned her readiness, engaged her deeply, right where she was,
At the well.
at the well. And her testimony then became the catalyst for her entire village to come and hear Jesus. Or Lydia in Acts 16.
The businesswoman in Philippi.
Yeah, the text says God opened her heart. She welcomed Paul and Silas, and her home became the hub, the relational starting point for the church in that whole city. These weren't just individuals who believed. They were people whose openness unlocked doors for wider impact.
It's like God connects you to the network he's already preparing. Okay, so this whole strategy, the source talks about its components, right? The anatomy of access. Where do we even start putting this into practice?
It always starts with the first component, prayerful entry and discernment. Before you make a plan, before you strategize, you listen. It starts with attunement to God.
So less about charging in with my brilliant ideas.
Yeah, less of that. More pausing to listen and look. Asking God first, Lord, where are you already working here? Who have you prepared in this office, this neighborhood, this family? Awareness before activity.
Okay, discernment. That sounds important, but maybe a bit vague. How do we practice that?
Well, the source talks about it as spirit-formed perception. It's learning to recognize those signs of receptivity we talked about. Openness, curiosity, welcome. It's not about judging someone's worthiness or potential based on how they look or act on the surface.
And it takes practice, I guess, like building a muscle.
Exactly. Hebrews 5.14 talks about training ourselves through constant use to distinguish good from evil discernment. Discernment is a skill honed by practice, practically. The source suggests things like starting your day just asking, God, show me who you've prepared today. Resisting the urge to rush into conversations with your own agenda front and center.
Maybe prayer walking. Or just paying attention differently.
Yeah, prayerfully considering a specific area or group. Listening for those unexpected moments. A coworker suddenly shares a deep struggle. A neighbor brings up spiritual things out of the blue. Those could be prompts.
I can see how our own stuff could get in the way here. Like just being addicted to doing something or being afraid of silence or maybe just not really believing God is working behind the scenes.
Those are huge obstacles.
Yeah.
If you don't believe it's happening, you won't look for it.
Okay, so say we're praying, we're trying to discern, and we sense someone might be open. What's the next building block?
Then comes proclamation with discernment. And again, this isn't about just dropping a prepackaged gospel presentation.
Right.
It's about speaking life, announcing the reality of God's kingdom, but how you do it is crucial. The source points to Colossians 4.6. Let your conversation be always full of grace, seasoned with salt.
Seasoned with salt, meaning relevant,
Right.
Engaging.
Yeah, relevant, connecting with where people actually are, their history, their hopes, their real-life struggles, not just abstract ideas.
Like Paul on Mars Hill in Acts 17. He didn't just start preaching, he noticed their altar to an unknown God. He started there.
That's a perfect example of contextualized proclamation. He built a bridge from their reality, their spiritual searching, to the message about Jesus. And the source really emphasizes that the gospel often has the most impact when it's lived before it's explained.
So our integrity, our kindness, the way we actually live, that gives weight to our words.
Absolutely. It's about addressing the unspoken questions people carry about suffering, meaning, forgiveness, belonging. You're living out the answers, in a way.
So practically, this might mean just living out kingdom values, integrity, service, forgiveness visibly at work.
Could be. Or sharing a short personal story of how God's helped you appropriately. Watching for those hinge moments in conversation when someone shows vulnerability, maybe fear or hope or just uncertainty.
And asking good questions instead of just lecturing.
Yes. Crucially, asking questions. It's an invitation to explore, not a demand to agree. Which brings us to the third part, peace testing and relational gateways. Remember Jesus said, first say, peace to this house.
Yeah, the peace test.
That peace, shalom, it's more than just high. It's offering wholeness, well-being, God's flourishing. It's like a sacred invitation, and it acts as the barometer for receptivity.
So if the peace rests, meaning they welcome you, they lean in, maybe introduce you to others, they want to keep talking.
That's like a divine thumbs up, a confirmation. It signals, yes, I'm at work here. This person, this household might be a relational gateway.
Okay. But if the peace returns, meaning you sense resistance, maybe polite brush-offs, closed doors.
Then, according to Jesus' instruction, that's not failure. It's a signal. It's wisdom to prayerfully redirect your energy towards where you do sense that openness.
So it's strategic prioritization guided by where God seems to be opening doors, not a personal rejection.
Exactly. It reframes rejection completely. It's about stewarding your limited time and energy wisely, focusing with your spiritual momentum.
That's freeing. And the idea of the house often meant more than just the building, right? Like the whole network.
Yeah, often the extended family, the social network, the community connected to that person. A person of peace doesn't just open their own door, they can potentially open the door to their whole relational world.
So practical signs here might be observing hospitality, genuine openness, maybe someone in a secular job who really resonates with ethical principles that have spiritual roots.
Could be. Or recognizing who's a trusted figure in a community, like a grandmother everyone respects, or a community organizer, like Lydia, whose home became that central hub, that gateway.
Makes sense.
Hmm.
Okay, moving on. Once we're connected, maybe through a person of peace, what's next? The fourth block.
That's discipleship through discovery. And the key shift here is about cultivating spiritual ownership in others, not creating dependency on you.
So it's not about becoming the guru they always have to come to for answers.
Definitely not. The source highlights John 14.26. The Holy Spirit is the ultimate teacher. Our role isn't primarily to download information into people.
Okay, so what is our role?
We guide, we facilitate, we ask good questions, but the Spirit is the one who brings revelation. So we shift towards equipping people to discover truth for themselves, getting them into Scripture, helping them learn to pray and listen, encouraging them to actually apply what they're learning.
And that's where asking questions like, what does this passage say to you about God? Or how could this look in your life this week becomes so important?
Yes. Instead of just telling them what it means, you help them wrestle with it. It encourages critical thinking, personal ownership, and lets the Spirit do the deep work. You create space for that discovery, maybe one-on-one, maybe in a small group, but the focus is on their learning, their application.
Got it. And the final component in this anatomy of access.
The fifth one is multiplication through the indigenous host. This is really about seeing sustainable, widespread impact, what some people call movements.
Okay, indigenous host, meaning someone from within that culture or network.
Exactly. The idea is the message truly takes root when it's carried and led by local people in their own context. Our goal should be to equip and release, not to control and retain.
Like Paul appointing local elders in the churches he started, like in Acts 14.
That's a key model. He empowered local believers to lead their own communities. Often that initial person of peace or someone from their network becomes this indigenous host. They know the culture, the language, the relationships, the nuances, way better than any outsider ever could.
Like Lydia again, right? Her influence in Philippi was crucial for the church there.
For sure. This shifts our whole mindset from just additive growth, adding individuals to our thing, to multiplicative growth,
Mhm.
equipping locals who are already connected to reach their own networks, who then reach theirs, and so on.
That's a powerful shift. So practically, it involves identifying people with that potential, giving them tools and mentorship, but then actually stepping back.
Yeah, courageously stepping back, trusting them, releasing ownership, letting them lead in their own way, adapting things to their context.
Wow. Okay, putting this all together, it really sounds like these encounters, finding a person of peace, aren't just random luck. There's a sense of divine choreography.
Absolutely. The source emphasizes that God often orchestrates purposeful meetings. Think about Philip and the Ethiopian eunuch in Acts 8. That wasn't random.
Right. The Spirit explicitly told Philip where to go.
Exactly. And he found someone God had clearly prepared. The eunuch was already reading Isaiah, already seeking, already asking deep questions. Philip didn't have to drum up interest. He just had to join what God was already doing.
And he didn't give some generic talk. He started right where the eunuch was with that Isaiah passage and explained how it pointed to Jesus.
Perfectly contextualized. And notice, it led to action baptism, and then the eunuch went on his way. Philip didn't need to set up a long-term management plan for him. The eunuch was empowered to continue his journey.
That model feels like it could apply anywhere: work, school, family.
It absolutely can. It forces us to ask, how do we build bridges into people's actual lives and questions, instead of just throwing up walls of religious jargon or expecting them to fit into our programs?
And it seems like trusting God's timing is just non-negotiable here.
Yes.
Results might not be instant.
No, probably not. But you're partnering with a process God started long before you showed up, and that he will continue long after your conversation.
So pulling all these threads together, this person of peace strategy, it's fundamentally about shifting our whole posture, isn't it?
It really is. Shifting from trying to do God's work for him to humbly partnering with him in the redemptive work he's already doing, it's his strategy ultimately, rooted in his sovereignty, his love, his initiative in preparing hearts.
He's the ultimate strategist.
Right. And our role becomes less about being the star player, the one making everything happen.
And more about being a sensitive, obedient listener and responder.
Exactly. Our role is to listen, discern, empower, and trust. It frees us from seeing people as projects to be fixed or converted.
And invites us into real, authentic relationships.
Yeah. The power isn't in our clever techniques. It's in releasing God's shalom, his peace, as that sacred invitation. That's what brings transformation and multiplication flowing through these prepared relational gateways.
Okay, so let's bring this home. What does this mean for you listening right now? This isn't just theory, right? It's meant for everyday life.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
This isn't just for missionaries somewhere far away. It's for you, in your office, in your neighborhood coffee shop, at your kid's soccer game, with your family. And honestly, embracing this can feel incredibly liberating.
How so? Liberating.
Well, it takes that crushing burden off your shoulders, the feeling that you are solely responsible for creating spiritual change in someone. Instead, it places the primary responsibility on God's prior work and invites you to simply join him where you see his peace resting, where there's openness.
That sounds much more sustainable. And the source gives some practical handles, right? Ways to start.
Yeah, it's less about adding a complicated new program and more about shifting your mindset and daily practices, like,
Praying intentionally.
yes, making it a regular thing, maybe daily. Lord, who is the person of peace you want me to connect with today? Help me see where you're already working.
And then listening carefully, paying attention differently.
Yeah, actively watching for those signals: hospitality, curiosity, openness, maybe someone expressing a deeper longing or asking searching questions.
And then engaging gently, not forcing it.
Right? Being ready to share your own story or insights when it feels right, but doing it with grace. Asking questions that invite dialogue. Listening way more than you talk.
Okay, and if someone is open, discipling collaboratively.
Yeah, exploring truth together. You don't need all the answers. Maybe read something together, scripture perhaps, and just ask, what stands out to you here? What's this saying about God? How does this connect with life?
Learning together. And finally, releasing courageously.
Yes. When you see someone grasping things and they have influence in their own circles, look for ways to empower them. Mentor them, resource them, but ultimately trust them to carry it forward in their own way. Step back.
Wow. Okay, so to wrap up, the person of peace strategy is like rediscovering an ancient path, isn't it? A spirit-led way.
Yeah, it's about moving from striving based on our own pressure to seeking based on God's prior preparation. Moving from noise and frantic activity to quieter discernment. shifting focus from programs to people, prepared people.
So here's a final thought for you to maybe chew on this week, something drawn from the source material's reflections.
Where might God already be working in your life right now? Maybe in a specific relationship, a group you belong to, a place you go often, but maybe you've been too hurried, too distracted, too focused on your own agenda to even notice the signs.
Who around you might actually be a person of peace, but you haven't recognized them because you were looking for something louder, or maybe someone who already agreed with you, and what would it really look like to stay with them relationally, spiritually, investing patiently?
And maybe the deepest question, are your efforts to connect with people driven more by pressure internal or external, or by prayerful partnership, looking for where God is already moving?
Lots to think about. Listen for the whisper this week and watch for the signs of his peace.